I just saw Monkey Man at its world premiere here at South by Southwest, and I am pleased to report that not only is this movie amazing, but it's genuinely life-changing. At least for me.
Just one small ember can burn down everything.
Before my screening, the director, writer, and lead actor Dev Patel said a few words.
I'd never seen anyone that looked slightly like me before. And this guy blistered the screen, he had the same pigment as me, and from that day on, I fell in love with action movies.
This is a film that's true to its cultural core. It doesn't shy away from politics. It's brutal in not only its physical, but also mental nature. But best of all, it embraces the culture it's given. I don't want to sound insane for this, but I think the heart and soul of a proud Indian man was poured into this movie. It's not a cultural shortcut, it's a true study of the stories we were told as children. And it's everything I wanted, but still somehow so much more. This movie has absolutely been racing through my mind. It's actually 4:15 in the morning, and Monkey Man is like the only thing I can think about right now. And before we get into all of my thoughts on Monkey Man, if you've seen or want to check out Monkey Man, let me know what you guys think of it while I give you guys my thoughts in the comments down below. But I want to start off by talking about the cultural core of this movie, because I don't want to give too much away about the story itself, but it's basically like a young man's revenge story. It's based in Hindu religious lores, and it follows the god Hanuman, and the lore intertwines with his own mother, Indian political turmoil, and religious caste ideas. And I think throughout the entirety of this movie, why all of these religious core ideas worked so well is because the pacing was never super fast. It was never like action, action, action for 2.5 hours straight, but it was also not just lore dropping for the entirety of the runtime. The intertwining between the action and this real mythological lore that we're all read to as we're kids, it's blended together so well in a story that you can tell that Patel really wanted to tell. And it felt like he had the right idea going into it because it's something that he wanted to share rather than just tell to someone. I just connect to this film, and a lot of people that look like me will connect to this film. And obviously he's crazy John Wick-esque, like badass action. That's cool and all. I mean, I love seeing an action hero that looks like me, but also the fact that this lore is so integral to this character that I think is so cool is what makes the entirety of the concept of Monkey Man so interesting. And obviously you can't talk about Monkey Man without talking about the action. But before I get into that, I do want to quickly mention the production of this film, because a lot of people know, but this was actually bought out by Jordan Peele's production company, Monkey Paw, because originally this movie was just going to be dumped onto Netflix. I saw this in a packed theater, and like I said, it was just a life-changing experience, and you can actually tell throughout the entirety of this film, not only from the performances and every single set design, all of the visceral action moments, but also in a Q&A after the fact, we learned so much about how troubled this production really was. And that just makes me appreciate the movie even more. And on top of all these like pre-production things, once they got into production and the COVID stuff happened, there were so many other setbacks. Just to list a few that we actually learned about from the Q&A, Nev broke his foot and his hand during production. He also tore his shoulder. Behind the scenes people, like gaffers and stuff, had to be extras in the film. And COVID just stopped a bunch of the productions. It stopped a bunch of the locations that they could go to. Couldn't cross any borders. And again, this all goes back to the action. This movie is an action masterclass. It's undeniably inspired by Raid, John Wick, and as Nev mentioned in the Q&A, all of Korean cinema. That all shows in this movie for sure. But what I love so much about this film is that it's also completely its own thing. You find these elements like nightclub scenes, these wooden clubs, like all of these walls, the aquarium sequences. There's so many cool things in this movie that when it happens, you realize that they're inspired by something, but by the end of the sequence, you realize you just watched something completely different and something unique compared to anything you've ever seen in an action film ever in your life. But I like that this movie doesn't shy away from the physical, but also mental tortures of politics in India. And I find that to be a really interesting thing that a Hollywood movie dives into. I get why Netflix was probably going to have trouble where to allocate this movie in the marketing graph, because this isn't something that just appeals to one major audience. There's so many unique elements that Hollywood is just afraid to take the risk of that's shown in this movie. So much of the combat in this movie is hit for hit. The character never becomes overpowered. It feels like there's a true humanistic nature to Monkey Man. It doesn't feel like, the Baba Yaga, he's taken down 1 trillion men. Like, obviously, the Monkey Man, he's a powerful person. He's a god-esque figure. We get that. But at the end of the day, it also relies on the Indian lore of family, community, and building kind of a identity around the person you're becoming. And I think a big part of that was the training montage in this movie. It's one of my favorite training montages in cinema history. It's just my personal take, but I think it blends the cultural elements, the action elements, and just Dev Patel being smoking f***ing hot. Everything is just perfectly executed here. I think the kitchen fight is one where it's like post-training montage. It's really the first time you see a true evolution in the fighting style of this character, yet it still never feels unrealistic. It still feels like the same character, but yes, just elevated in a sense of, okay, we have a new reinventation of the Monkey Man. And like I said before, you can't talk about Monkey Man without talking about the action. But you also can't talk about the action without talking about the fact that this movie is visually raw. There are so many moments in this movie that you just feel like are so palpable. John Wick, I would say, is like digitally good. It looks like a Renaissance painting at times. But in this film, everything looks real. It looks dirty, and I love that. There's a list of just technical elements that this film flourishes in. I will say, I think it's just super ballsy, and I'll talk about the directorial debut aspect of this because, again, Dev Patel puts on a masterclass even behind the camera as much as he does on the camera. But there are a list of mounted camera shots on not only characters but objects and flame things, and it's crazy. There's a few shots, one in specific that they had mentioned in the Q&A after, where there's a scene at the Diwali festival and the camera is supposed to be on a crane, but apparently the day of, the crane broke and they just attached it to a rope, and you see in that sequence the camera is flying down on a rope, and then it is physically running through the audience, which means that they had to take the camera off the rope, hold it in their hands, and run. I think this movie is just it's not necessarily like technically inventive, I guess, in the like raw camera body sense, but it's also very technically inventive in the sense of using the camera for something different that we haven't seen in a hand-to-hand style combat movie in Hollywood. I want to throw this in when talking about the visuals of this movie because there is a very specific moment in Monkey Man, and I don't want to get into spoilers here, but it's truly taken from the depths of lore of Hanuman, and it's put onto the screen perfectly. It is so transcendent of what this film really was from the beginning and what it ends up being. It's just something so different. It's sci-fi-y, it's extraterrestrial, it's unreal. This was a very creative, very ballsy, and very unique way to portray it on screen. When you see the movie and you see this moment, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You can bookmark this moment even, I promise you. And as someone who enjoys a lot of Bollywood films and Hollywood films, obviously, it's more in the sense of it's leaving you with the emotional and honestly lore, mystical elements of Bollywood, yet it takes that like David Leitch style of physicality in Hollywood that you don't really get in Bollywood. There's just so many moments in this movie where you see a true evolution of this character, yet they just end up going in a completely different direction. That's something is unique for Hollywood but might not be based as much in Bollywood or vice versa. I think it's an amazing blend of what an Indian filmmaker can really bring to this kind of like smaller budget level action movie in Hollywood. Before I talk about the directorial elements from Dev Patel, which obviously I do love, I want to talk about the cast because I think the structure of characters in this film is something so interesting and honestly unique to this Hollywood film that normally in a big action movie, you have your action hero, he's motivated by something, and then there's a love interest, there's a villain, the big bad. Like, starting with Dev Patel, obviously he is amazing here, but I think the layer of character hierarchy is what makes this movie so great. I don't want to spoil anything, but the way that the different classes and parts of this hierarchy are expressed through either romantic or enemy points of views is so unique. It's not like just a love interest or a singular villain per se. It's just about the wrongdoers versus the ones that have been wrong done. It's like a simplified yet thematically deep way to exemplify regular basic story beats and character motivations, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And as a directorial debut, I just can't believe that it is one. This movie is so visually ballsy. There's so much that even I feel like solidified directors wouldn't dare of doing. I feel like there isn't all A-list talent on this movie, but it feels like something only the best of the best could come together to make in this industry. And like I said before, I feel insane saying this just because I feel like a lot of people won't talk about this element of it, but these are true stories we were told as children. I'm really excited for this movie to get its wide release, for people like me that look like me to see this film. Again, it's politically charged, it's visually nuts, and it is an absolute shot from left field, out of the dark, blindfold on. And it absolutely hits the mark. I love this movie. I'm gonna give Dev Patel's directorial debut, Monkey Man, a 9 out of 10. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I'll probably rewatch this movie in April when it comes out and give it a 9.5 to 10. I am so excited to rewatch this movie, so excited to take my family to watch this movie. It's an absolutely brutal film, but one that is 100% worth the watch. And let me know what you guys think about this film in the comments down below when you do get the chance to see it. But stay tuned for all my other reviews coming out of South by Southwest. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Peace.